Welcome back to Beyond Religion, X2x2 Stories of Deconstruction, where we talk with people who have left the 2x2 church and whose beliefs have moved beyond Christianity and organized religion. I'm joined today by Alex Chu. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for volunteering to be on here. I look forward to learning a little bit more about your story. And before we get too far down the road, I like to ask people what their current beliefs are or how they would describe them.
Right now, I consider myself an agnostic atheist. It's funny because I would have never said that when I was a kid, which I'll get into later on, given my Christian school upbringing and the two by twos. But that's a whole situation in
Right.
itself. But right now, I consider myself an agnostic atheist. Do I believe? Okay, so I like to be really careful here because words have meaning and words can be misconstrued. So
Right.
I'll try to be careful here. Do I believe that the God of the Bible exists and the God of the Bible that we were taught exists? Most likely not. And if that God did exist, I will have a lot of problems with that God. But yes, I consider myself an agnostic atheist. I don't hold any other beliefs. Um, I do find Chinese and Asian religion interesting,
Hmm.
but whether it holds any significance to me at the moment, I'd say no. That's
Okay.
currently where I stand.
Out of curiosity, what is it about like the Asian religions that uh, you find interesting or speak to you a little bit?
More so my cultural background.
Hmm.
So I, which is actually a pretty funny story. I have a story. I have a story which would tie into this. Um, I in my early 20s started learning martial arts. I stopped a while back, and they were a very spiritual bunch of people.
Hmm.
And when they would speak about, they'll talk about all of the chi and how your body reacts in a on the spiritual plane, so to speak. Um, that kind of appeals to me as far as a cultural background. But as far as a belief in whether I would dedicate my life to it, it's going to need a way higher burden of proof
Hmm.
because it's saying stuff which I have found hard to believe. I was deep down fairly skeptical. Oh, but my story about this, it was Clyde McKay. I remember I was maybe in my mid 20s then. Um, he waddles he waddles in front of the microphone and he talks. Oh, he said something like, "Lots of people like to learn self defense, but wouldn't it be nice to be defenseless?"
Oh man, that is classic worker speak right there.
My mum started kicking me after that because she knew because I was already a couple of years into my martial arts, and she started kicking me, thinking like just tapping what one of my legs, and then I was like, "Oh no, this is so embarrassing."
Kind of going back to the beginning, how did you meet two by twoism? How did you come by it? How did that start?
I was born and raised, which
Okay.
is actually pretty funny as an immigrant kid. Um, my understanding of it is that when my parents were in Malaysia before they moved, they somehow got to my father's auntie, I believe. And then from there, troubled times, or how they prey on people which have struggled for a very long time. And then eventually they love bombed my father into it. We moved, and then my mum got brought in. And then after that, we just eventually moved down. My mum and father moved down to Melbourne, and that's where I
Hmm.
was born. So my initial couple years was in Melbourne. I have an older brother, 3 years older than me. He
Okay.
left as well. Then after that, I was just pretty much raised in it. We went to um, a decently modest Sunday morning meeting. It was probably about 20 odd. I hear now that a lot of them have um, left and died off. Um, Rough estimate, I would probably say maybe 15 or so, but don't don't hold it against me. It's just a
Yeah.
very rough estimate. And yeah, I kept going there for a couple of years. One of my biggest regrets in my life was professing to Alan Kiddo. But
Mm.
again, I was indoctrinated. How could I tell the difference?
Yep.
He was the worker, for anyone who's not listening, well, anyone who is listening. He was the worker that was named as the person that was hiding abuse during the 60 Minutes story in 2018. I remember the events after really well. Like, it's burnt into my memory. Um, then, yeah, stayed for a couple years. And that was when around COVID was when we physically left. I already mentally checked out years ago,
Hmm.
probably about 10 or so years ago. But
I'm just going to go ahead and mention that you did a podcast where you talked a lot about your upbringing and such with Laura McConnell Conti. And so, if anybody is listening or watching this, definitely finish watching this whole episode and then jump over to uh, 2x2 Truth Cult Kids, I believe is the name of the podcast.
yeah,
Um,
Truth to My Two Cult Kids, I believe it is.
yeah, you can find it on wherever you get your podcasts. So with that said, we'll probably have a little bit of overlap, but we'll also likely get into some new things depending on what we can uncover in the brain of Alex Chu today. So you had parents who were freshly in did and I've gathered from a lot of other kids who grew up with parents who weren't born and raised that it felt a little bit like their parents had something to prove and so were like extra zealous. Did that match your experience?
Yes, my parents were pretty zealous. Actually, it was more so my father. My father would talk in a very old English manner of speaking. Um, he would say a lot of the thou, thines, or
Mm-hmm.
even just thinking about it creeps me out.
Yeah.
And before I deconstructed, before I fully admitted to myself that I am an agnostic atheist, I remember we were forced to go to a new church, and this was a Chinese church. And whenever they would ask people to pray, my father would always say thee, thou, thine. Like, he just could not get it out of his head.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the 2x2s, in a matter of speaking, kept that language in him, so much so that he thought that the only way that you can fit in is by adopting how they speak, how they talk, how they walk. Kind of like the concept of forced assimilation,
Mm-hmm.
which as an immigrant kid is rather trigger, if I should say so myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, you adopt so many of their cultural. You um, try to fit in. You try to be like them, but we will never be like them. Yeah, so basically, we were forced to react and act and assimilate into the
Right.
2x2 white Australian culture. Because I just want to put that qualifier there, because I'm aware that the American 2x2 culture, while different, can hold a lot of similarities with the Australian culture. I remember growing up, and because we were Asian, and because I was, well, I'm going to trigger myself because I am non binary and along the genderqueer spectrum. But I am going to trigger myself and say I was born male. So I have a distinct impression that the Asian people, I'm trying to be really careful with my words here. The Asian people are looked down upon, but if you are an Asian woman, you do get married fairly quickly.
An interesting observation for sure.
I can talk about that for ages about how society treats Asian men differently to Asian women, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Right. And it plays out, in the 2x2 context to a certain degree, but then society in general, a whole lot too. So you were born and raised, and uh, you had mentioned on Laura's podcast that you grew up going to a Christian school, which is fairly interesting for a 2x2. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that experience was?
So when I was fairly early in my deconstruction, this was maybe 2021-ish, 2020-ish, I was taking pictures of the stuff that my school did in the end of year magazine. And let me see if I can find some choice snippets for you. Let's just start with this one because it's easy. Letter to a non-Christian friend.
Oh no. You've got me at the title.
I remember writing this. I was reading the one that was put in the we call it the ascribe,
Mhm.
and it was it's just wild going through it. Like let me just read you some of these. I'll just read the last paragraph, just a bit of it. My relationship with Jesus makes a difference in my life because knowing how he loves me, wants to know me and what I'm doing, and the fact that he knew me even before I was born makes me feel so special. And as I said before, it warms me to the core. This was what we were expected to hand off to a non-Christian friend. There's this thing here. I found this a while back. It says, "Yo, this is a song about Jesus and us, the sin, the relationship, and the behavior. Jesus is our savior, the one that knows our behavior. One day he will judge if we're standing or sludge." Oh, that's cringe. Oh, God is good, glory and light. He threw Satan into the pit of fire and told everybody he was a liar. He should walk by faith. No, sorry, we should walk by faith and not by sight. It's dark as night, and when you walk by faith, it all turns bright. Oh, that's cringe.
Oh, that's very beautiful, Alex.
That's cringe.
I love the picture that this gives us, though, of where your mindset was at that time of your life.
Came up with a fun word. I call it theological whiplash. Um, because when I was in year 4, around 10, let's just say, rough estimate,
Mhm.
that was when I went into Christian school. I was in public school for the first couple of years of my life. And we every single morning, I remember we would used to sing Christian songs. So this is nothing which is found in the 2x2 hymn book. They gave me an image of a God of love and someone that was very inclusive of everyone else. And when I look at how the 2x2s reacted, I knew fairly early I had cognitive dissonance because they were talking about a God that was inclusive and deity that was inclusive. And the 2x2s were talking about an exclusive God, someone which was um, uh, someone which was going to throw you into a pit of fire if you don't live according to how the 2x2s live. And I remember at a very young age that I was when these two ideas clashed, it was a mind fuck.
Mhm.
Um, because how can a young mind like that comprehend cognitive dissonance, comprehend two ideas that are vastly different? So I went along and I created my own God, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you every single day you walk into Christian school, you sing these songs. Oh, how does it go? Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons did Father Abraham. I admire them, and so do you. So let's just praise the Lord, right foot, and then it just goes on and on ad
Mm-hmm.
nauseum.
An emphasis on the nauseum.
Have you heard that, Mike? I'm not sure if you have.
I've heard it. I mean, certainly not in the two by twos, but I've heard it in other media. Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up on those happy clappy Christian children's songs for like year until I was about 12. And then came the really good stuff. My school had a lot of an association with Hillsong.
What is Hillsong for those that maybe aren't aware?
Hillsong is a Pentecostal church. I believe they started in Australia. The most recent pastor, Brian Houston, last I heard, no, actually, he was kicked out after covering for his father's abuse allegations. I have no idea where they are now, but my school had a lot to do with Hillsong. So we
Mm-hmm.
had all of all of their praise and worship songs. I went to a Hillsong youth group once when I was probably 15 or so, and I remember wanting to be there because it was exciting. It wasn't like the two by twos. It wasn't you just sit down, keep quiet, listen to some old crone on the podium, talk in a very monotone manner, and you don't get anything, and you feel like, why am I here? What am I trying to get? But then when you look at the pastors from Hillsong, when you look at the pastors, I think Elevation Church does that as well. They're all very bombastic. They all have charisma, and
Right.
you feel like you can get drawn in. So when I was looking at how they reacted to how the two by twos reacted, it was an absolute mind fuck trying to process why they were reading from the same book,
Mm-hmm.
but they had completely different belief structures. So I went along with that until I finished schooling in year 12. I was 18 then. And then I like to say I became dormant in the faith. So I was just dormant until some major events happened. Um, Put a little chink in my armor. I became even more dormant, if I should say so myself. And then, yeah, 2020 hits around and I deconstruct.
You deconstructing at 2020. Is that really when it started, or were there kind of little cracks that were forming prior to that maybe you didn't realize at the time, but realized in hindsight?
Yeah, I would say so. I've often said that I physically left in 2020 ish. I mentally checked out probably when I left school. If I was to talk about specific events, now to protect the person's privacy, I won't mention who, but I would probably give a decent idea so that people would actually know. There was a case many years ago in Indonesia, and uh, people were a bunch of people were caught smuggling drugs into the country, and the case went on for ages. And eventually, they got given the two ringleaders got given the death penalty. One of them I know has got a 2x2 connection. When I found out, that put a chink in my armor, so to speak, because I was brought up on a God that can do anything. This is, you can probably see how my beliefs, my old beliefs, vary greatly from the 2x2 beliefs, because we didn't use the and thou during prayer. That's just cringe. Um, so yes, that happened. I had a chink in my armor, so to speak. And then I came across some content online which really started to question and really started to put a question to my mind. And then eventually one day I said to myself, okay, if I'm going to find out whether this is true, I'm going to sit down, read my Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelations. I stopped in Samuel because it just got too bloody. It didn't last long. It got too bloody, too wild, and I tried before I finally admitted to myself. I tried so hard, but first, there's a part of me that always likes to doubt, and this is why doubting Thomas is my favorite. Is by far my favorite disciple, because he wanted evidence, man. He wanted to know whether it was true. Doubt plays a lot into it when I was deconstructing,
Mm-hmm.
because doubt, cognitive dissonance, people saying that we know it is true because we are teaching from the Bible, which is secular logic. Anyway, eventually I just said no. I if a God actually exists, they would know that I am trying my hardest to find out whether they exist or not in a genuine way, because I want to know whether it's true or not, and then if it's true, I'm going to follow. But yeah, I don't think. Yeah, so that was just my start of my deconstruction journey. It's been an absolute ride,
Mm-hmm.
especially because I had cognitive dissonance and all of that. So yeah, that was really fun.
That was in 2020ish that you kind of started that process. Uh, what was the point that you actually admitted to yourself or to anybody else that you were no longer Christian?
I remember this story really well. I was recounting it to one of my friends a couple nights ago. Um, so I was already reading my Bible fairly regularly. I would probably read a chapter a day. So somewhere in 2020, 2021. And back then we already left the 2x2s, physically left the 2x2s, I should say,
Right.
mentally. And I remember waking up on a Sunday, and then I just was like, why do I need to do this when the only thing I've ever seen in that book is heinous stuff that would go against my own internal moral code, which I have
Mm-hmm.
built up when I was secretly deconstructing. So I sat there for a bit, and I remember I had a little bit of a mental breakdown, and I remember sitting there, and I finally admitted to myself that I no longer believe, based off the stuff which I was taught growing up, that you must follow this specific ethical code, this specific moral code in order to be a good person. When I just read my Bible, and I just could not rationalize all of it. I got into
Mm-hmm.
all of the apologetics, I got into all of that. And yeah, that was when I finally admitted it. That was probably in a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say.
Something that I realized we kind of didn't, and we don't necessarily need to dive into it, but I think it's worth mentioning is uh, you left with your family, right? What was the kind of circumstances around that?
I just remember my father mentioning to us that they were racist, which I've known for a very long time. And
Right.
it's like what I say, no shit buttercup. Um,
Yes, perfectly put.
and and he finally sat us down and said, "We're no longer going." Even for ages, when we actually when my family mentioned that they are racist, but that was when we physically stopped going. Um, Probably 2021, I'd say,
Mhm.
or 2020. It was COVID is a it blurs in my mind.
Yeah, COVID messed up everybody's time frames are all screwed up from COVID. Was that transition fairly, like, comfortable for you, or was there a part of you that was, like, felt like you were being ripped out of a place that you sort of belonged?
No.
No, not at all.
I'm gonna say something pretty messed up, so excuse my manner when I say this. The two by twos being racist made it easy to leave because I had no friends there. I had no connections there. I have no family there. So why should I feel like I should um, stay? No matter of speaking, I wanted to leave years ago, but when we left physically, it was a relief. Back then, I was still sort of considering myself a Christian,
Right.
but I was fairly progressive on most fronts, like all of the evangelical Christians. The Christians that I grew up with in school would say that I was a heretic, which I
Mhm.
wear as a badge of honor. Um, so yes, that's pretty much how we left.
How long do you think that it took you to go from, questioning, like, is this what I wanna believe, or is this what I believe, to, uh, being, you know, as sure as you could be that you were, an agnostic atheist? Was that a period of months or years, or how was that?
Years deconstructing, I'd say.
Mhm.
Probably close to a decade. Because when you are indoctrinated into a Christian, this is one thing which I've been thinking about a lot lately. Trying to see how my Christian school upbringing affected how I saw myself in the two by twos. It was a very long time for me to deconstruct because given my upbringing, given trying to understand all of these things which I was taught that the only that um and trying to break that down, that was probably the hardest thing which I think about daily. I probably can't give you a solid answer. I'm sorry,
No, that's good.
but it's something which I'm still coming to terms with. Maybe in a couple of years you can come back to me and ask that question. I'll probably be able to give you a better answer.
I totally understand, like, not being able to really pinpoint the timeline. I have the same struggle with myself. I think I I wasn't a journaler. Like, I've talked to some people who, like, kept a diary and journaled all their thoughts, and I didn't do that, and I really wish that I had, because it all, once you get a few years removed from it, it all starts kind of blending together, and you kind of don't really realize, like, how quickly those memories fade.
Oh,
Understand?
totally. Just about the thing fading together, if I may expand on that.
Yeah.
Um, I have a one line document. No, a couple pages, and there is a one line to try to jog my memory. It is of my Christian school experiences and my two by two experiences. I remember trying to jot that down and trying to separate whether it was a two by two experience or my Christian school experience was so hard given the religious context which I was brought up in.
You had mentioned earlier that you identify as non-binary. How did that process of kind of finding yourself go, especially in contrast to the way that we were brought up.
I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like, I'm along that spectrum. Um, I always questioned things about why we have to do things. One of the things I remember vividly questioning was why in the church, what was that verse in Genesis which says God created man and woman in his image?
Hmm.
I think that was Genesis 1. I forgot the exact. I'm not pulling on my Bible for this. I think it's in the other room.
There's going to be a test at the end of this podcast, so
Fun fact, we actually had memory verses.
oh yeah.
Yeah. This was. I remember questioning why in the two by twos and why within church leadership, because I'm going to sound a bit crude here, what you have between your pants dictates um, who is the leader and who is subservient to the leader. I
Hmm.
remember questioning that. I was thinking that makes no sense, especially since we're created equal. Um, and that was put on the back burner for a bit um, while I started deconstructing. And then I remember, I can't give you a specific time frame, but towards where I probably a couple of years ago, I was just like, wait, this gender stuff makes no sense. And then I started to properly, sorry, deconstruct how Western ideals around gender and sexuality um, affects how someone is socialized um, within their specific biology. I hate using that word.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that was when I finally started deconstructing that, and that's when I finally said, okay, I'm most like I'm non-binary and along the trans spectrum, and that I'm non-binary. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm happy with that. I am. I just feel like it's more me because
Hmm.
I was always a rebel. Um, Deep down, I wanted to do different things. I think this is why Laura and I get along so well.
Yeah, Laura's definitely a rebel.
Yeah. So deep down, I wanted to rebel. I wanted to do all this stuff which I never did, and that's when I just said, okay, I've accepted who I am. Well, yeah, and I'm just gonna keep going and living my life as it is.
I'm so glad that you were able to get to that point and really embrace yourself. I know that for a lot of us two by twos, it's a struggle to really find yourself and be willing to embrace who you really are, because maybe it's not exactly what the people around you want for you in many cases, or just what society deems the norm.
Cishet. What is it? Compulsory. Oh, comp cishet. That's right.
Yep.
Compulsory
Compulsory.
cisgender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's that term. I mean, while it fits, large swaths of society, I feel like the two by two, community definitely uh, pushes that really, really hard, and makes, as you and I know, it makes it very difficult for anybody who is anywhere outside of that very strict, uh, you know, two gender spectrum.
Yeah, that was a very interesting journey, which I still am on. I'm still don't fully understand where I sit on that, but yeah, where I am right now, I'm saying I feel way better than when I was in the two by twos. I can actually live it unapologetically, not openly, and not sorry, and put it in the closet. So yeah, I should maybe bring up something which really made me question. So I've spoken about racism a lot before. Um, and one of the things that made me realize that they were racist was when I first met Laura. No, sorry. This was the first time when I actually admitted it to myself openly that they are, in a sense, white nationalists. Um, I met Laura in, I think it was 2023, and we met at UTS, University of Technology Sydney, which, fun fact, was also where I got my bachelor's degree. And she said when she was in front of everyone that that the two by twos are a white nationalist group, and I remember sitting there being a bit stunned. I was like, "Wait, is that true?" And then I thought about all of my experiences back then. It was something that helped me deconstruct that idea, deconstruct um, that uh, these people for certain know that they are right. Um, it was, and that was when, yeah, it was just, there's like these weird inklings, which I'm sure you have, Mike, of when you start questioning things and it just builds up. It's kind of like that pressure pot, which builds up, builds up, builds up, and then boom, you finally
Mm-hmm.
admit to yourself that you no longer believe. But yeah, that was another event. I still think about that speech, that event every now and then, because it was a fairly pivotal experience for me in my deconstruction journey,
Cool.
trying to understand everything which I was brought up on, especially the racism.
Yeah, with regard to the white nationalist term, I think that it definitely fits with as a generalization, right?
Yeah, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but so often with two by twos and other fundies, I often wonder where the person ends and the system begins, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because we see, I think there was a case a couple of months ago. They were part of a funded group up north in Queensland. For people listening, I currently live in Sydney. So north Queensland is up north for me. Um, they did not give their child medicine, and eventually
Hmm.
she passed away. Their beliefs had the consequence of that young child passing away. So,
Right.
do I blame them as a person? Yes and no, but also they're a victim of the same system, the same control that I had as a kid. So,
I've been having those same thoughts, having to hold two truths at the same time, especially when it comes to workers in the two by two church. They are they have done some horrific things. I'm not talking about necessarily sexual abuse, but just the emotional and spiritual abuse that they perpetuated, and yet they were perpetuating that kind of abuse because they were part of that system, because they had fully bought in. And sometimes those same workers get out and realize in hindsight just how horrific they were. I've talked to a number of workers who had to basically make apology rounds after they left the church. um, and so yeah, it's definitely an interesting little uh, mind exercise, I think, for a lot of us in and out of the church to realize that the victims are also the perpetrators.
yes, speaking on that, workers being victims, I won't mention who, but and I will not gender them on purpose. Um, I was having a chat with them a while back, and the thing that stuck with me, which I think about pretty often, they told me that the longer they were in the work, the more they felt their humanity slipping.
Hmm.
And I remember when I first left, I was only angry at the workers. I had only pure rage against the workers. But when that ex worker told me that, it made me sit down and think for a while, because they were as much of a victim. They still perpetuate a lot of the same behaviors, but they were as much of a victim of the system as me. Um, so trying to come to terms with that was a whole complete. I'm still deconstructing a lot of stuff. In fact,
Yeah.
one fun thing which I like to say is that my education helped me deconstruct. Um, I did cybersecurity ethics for one of my postgrad studies, and we went into ethical frameworks, deontology, virtue ethics, and utilitarianism. I always struggle saying that. I was thinking that younger Alex, if younger Alex did cybersecurity as their degree, it would have pushed me to the deconstruction train even
Mm,
faster,
right.
because in that subject you had to choose your position and argue for that position using logic and the ethical frameworks that we were brought up, which we learnt. And when you're in the two by twos and in Christianity, you are told what to think. Thus, apologetics, listening to all of the Christian influences. So when I did cybersecurity ethics, I had to choose my position. I had to argue for it, and then I had to try to convince the reader that my position was right over something which they believe. So I think, yes, cybersecurity ethics was amazing. I still love that subject despite it giving me an absolute mindfuck. But yeah, my education, I've said so often, saved me, which
Hmm.
I will forever be grateful for.
You're not the first one that I've talked to now for this project who, for whom the that evil college ended up working a little bit too well.
I think it was a pastor that said, don't don't get too educated. Otherwise, no, lots of people like to educate themselves out of God,
Hmm.
and that always makes me laugh because I'm one of those people.
Such a funny statement for like a spiritual leader to say, because like if it's that easy for people to use logic to think their way out of these beliefs, then maybe these beliefs aren't quite as strong as you think they are.
I can't believe I forgot to mention this. Um, Christian school, I have no idea. We had a sub, and somehow that sub was asking us what we believe, which was a lovely way to try to educate children. And everyone was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus is the one true way." I said the same thing as well. And there was this kid, and he defiantly, with like absolute surety and absolute defiance, said, "I don't believe." Everybody in the class whipped their head at him and said, "Really?" That was it was just a moment which I think about every now and then, because it was probably the first time that I met someone that does not believe the stuff that we were brought on up on is true.
Obviously, it was very memorable for you. You still remember it. And the experience is memorable of meeting your first atheist, because not because we didn't probably encounter atheists, at many points throughout our childhoods, but not many who were willing to just say it outright to in front of us, especially people who knew that we were Christian. Um, there's just not a lot of people that want to, poke that bear, so to speak.
Oh, totally. Because I was at least 15, 15, 16. No, Probably no, sorry. I was at least 12 to 15 then. So that was my first time I met someone that defiantly said, "I do not believe."
Well, I think I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention the memery that you have contributed to a little site called the Millstone. We don't necessarily need to say too much about it, other than I think you may have the record for most memes posted in the Millstone.
I have no idea how many points I have. I'm too scared to look. I think it just comes from my theological whiplash and a whole bunch of religious trauma, which gave me a
Yep.
really dark sense of humor.
And I think that's exactly what the X2x2 community needs very desperately, is that dark humor to get through all of the trauma that we've endured.
Sometimes I feel like dark humor is the only thing that gets me through. Like, because sometimes I felt like really, um, I've had some pretty bad days as of late. And the only thing which I can the only thing which properly makes me laugh is that dark humor. And I think we do need more of that for sure.
Just speaking for myself, at least, I am a little bit frightened to think of what the next 5-10 years hold for me, considering what the last 5 to 10 years have held. And I imagine that's maybe the case for you. It's quite a journey.
Yeah, but I would like to look back. I remember when I turned 30, I was like, when I'm 40, I would like to look back at my 30s and say that I've not wasted any of it.
Hmm.
And I hope that will be so in the coming days. Amen.
Well, on that note, Alex, thank you so much for joining me here and sharing so much about your journey. And I wish you the best, and I hope that the meme stream will continue strong for the days to come.
I hope that it will be so. Amen.